So existing watersheds can still apply to this, not just new ones.
That's correct. So
Okay.
they would apply as an existing watershed group.
Right. And then the other question I have is in some of the funding that we've seen, it's regional, maybe Central California or Northern. So is this uniformly, we're trying to do this throughout the state?
This is not state funding, this is federal funding, and it is across the entire area in which reclamation works. And so that is the 17 Western states, as well as Alaska, Hawaii, and several US territories. So entities across the entire West are going to be submitting applications to the same funding opportunity.
And is there a maximum amount of funding that's available, or do you know how many groups will get the first round?
So we actually have quite a significant amount of funding due to an influx in bipartisan infrastructure law funding. Historically, so, I don't think the funding is necessarily the limit. It's going to depend on how many groups we have that submit applications that meet the priorities of the funding opportunity. And most likely, we have under the bipartisan infrastructure law, we had $100 million set aside for the Cooperative Watershed Management Program over 5 years. That doesn't just go to this funding opportunity. It also goes to another funding opportunity where we offer implementation funding to these groups. So it's difficult to say exactly how much funding will be allocated to this particular funding opportunity because it depends on where we receive interest through other funding opportunities as well. But I'd say overall the funding level is not probably the main limiting factor. It's how many we receive. Historically, under this program, each year we've offered the funding opportunity. We typically get between 30 and 60 applications. And then we fund as many of those as we can historically. So I would say, we may see an increase in applications due to the increase in funding, but there is a fairly significant amount of funding available for this funding opportunity.
Raman, I really appreciate that. And the reason why I'm asking these questions is we do a lot of grants or applications, and then percentage of the ones that you get are lower than we would like. And so that's why I'm asking. So I think this is a great program and that we can really benefit from this. And so I'm trying to really just kind of stir it up so that everyone goes, oh, this is such a great opportunity. We want to do this. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? If not, thank you so much. And I hope that everybody's coming in.
I think there was one question in the chat asking about what are the funding priorities.
Oh, good question. Go ahead. And that's from Laura. What are the funding priorities?
So, yeah, so the within the funding opportunity, there is a set of evaluation criteria that are used to score the applications as they come in. So you would address those evaluation criteria in your application, and then a review committee review your application based on those criteria. So it's not necessarily a list of priorities, but it's how we are prioritizing the projects. So those are based on the expected benefits essentially associated with the project, the stakeholder support for the watershed group, and the diversity of the watershed group in terms of stakeholder support and participation, and the readiness to proceed of the project. So what your schedule looks like and whether you have a well thought out plan for how you will be using the funding. And then lastly, there is a set of priorities, or the last criteria focuses on some DOI and presidential priorities, which are focused on disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged tribal communities, and potential impacts to climate change.
Any other questions? Thank you for covering that. All right, I don't see anything in the chat. So we will move on to our Localizing California Waters Conference. Lynn.
Regina, do you want me to
Heidi.
share for you?
Yeah, could you? Hi, everyone.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm traveling, forgive my poor Wi-Fi. So thanks, Heidi, for sharing my slides. So, and thank you everyone for giving me a few minutes to let you know about a unique conversation that's been happening every year, and it's growing. In November around Yosemite, there's a meeting called Localizing California Waters. Some of you have been to probably either the annual meeting, and that's again every year up by Yosemite in November. We've also had regional meetings from Ventura to San Luis Obispo, as well as up in Mendocino. So maybe you've attended some of those, but I'm here to invite you to the November meeting. And next slide, Heidi, thank you. It's November 7th through 10th. And that is, again, right outside of Yosemite National Park. It's a great time to be up there. You're going to get a copy of these slides, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the conference and the background and what we're covering this year. And you can go to the next slide. We'll share these slides with everyone. Really a little bit of background about the conference. That's been going on since 2014. We just finished our summary impact report, which I'm happy to share. A lot of you have participated. One of the goals is to really focus on place-based transformations for climate that connect and overlap fire, habitat, water, stream flow, community. So really you all working towards within your piece within the Watershed Council here and other watershed coalitions is really aligned with the efforts that we're trying to move towards. So next slide, thank you. The conversations are unique. They're in a retreat-like setting. We ask everyone to really take off their hat and focus on trying to advance place-based thinking together in collaboration. We have a series of different types of workshops that are fairly unique and are really geared towards taking the information that you're learning and sharing with each other and making use of that and putting it towards next steps that you can take home to your local watersheds and regions. So again, these are a series of workshops and sharing of different strategies that help us move to remove barriers and to actually get some unlikely partnerships together and start to think about systems and watershed-based thinking together in this retreat setting. And again, next slide, you can read all this later if you'd like, if you're interested. Who attends LCW? And we call it LCW for short. It's participants from all over the state. It really was rooted in more of a design, installers, and policy workshop. And now it really is highly attended by tribes, NGOs, community-based organizations, academia, researchers. And so it's really, again, the idea here is that it will take all of us to get to a healthy watershed community, and what is our role and what are we learning and thinking and rethinking together. So this is again how everyone is invited, but you can see here in the pie chart who the main participants usually are. And you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Heidi. Just to share here, this is our advisory circle and steering committee, and some of these folks you may know. You are welcome to reach out to them at any time and ask them questions, as well as myself. At this point, I am still the program manager for Localizing California Waters, so you can always reach out to me and I'll have my information at the end. But a little bit more about just the meeting this year. It's a little different. If you go to the next slide. And sorry for all the words on the slide, but really the steering committee and the advisory circle wanted to focus on, in a year of climate whiplash, going from drought and heat to floods and all this different risk assessments, how can we look at what is working? Let's make sure to map what is working that's place-based, and how do we advance that and accelerate it? So we're doing that in a couple different formats. We're going to have a toolkit data collaborative symposium. We're going to have a symposium about how do we actually get things done through a career force perspective with quality. And then we're also going to be having the bulk of it just really about bright spots. What are the innovative strategies that are working? Who was there? What were the funders that were there that made those funding elements available? Who were the community members that helped engage, that were engaged and did engage? How did that engagement work? How did the design work? How did it not work? What were the lessons learned? What was the monitoring? How did we do that? So we're really trying to come up with a full spectrum scale of storytelling to share with everyone. What were the policies that came out of that project or that could be recommended from that project? So it will be a plenary session. We're not going to go into breakouts. It's going to be very different. And we're going to be linking and trying to connect all the different pieces of what it takes to get to healthy watershed communities through these stories. So it's a really different format. I think you're going to enjoy it if you want to come. We're going to try to have a little bit of it broadcast via the web, but otherwise it's really an in-person conversation. Next slide. I'm almost done, I believe. This is just an overview of the 4 days. So there's workshops, tours, there's hands-on activities, a lot tribally led, and also by the Forest Service. There's a 10-year study that was done from the Rim Fire that used to be one of the largest fires, catastrophic fires. And so there'll be a tour of that on the first day and quite a few different workshops. OPR is hosting one of the workshops. There's a water budget workshop that will bring water efficiency, stream flow water budgets, as well as other types of water budgets in a conversation. Wednesday and Thursday will mainly be plenary sessions together, including a workshop that you should be able to bring some next steps home to your region. And then Friday we wrap up, but we also have a focus symposium about collaborative data toolkits. So again, this is just an overview. It's an arc and it really feeds itself. I would highly support you to come for the whole thing and not just pop in. And I think I only have another slide or two if you want to. Yeah, there's some quotes. Keep going about how much people love LCW. It's a great community. It's a good network. This is where you can find more information. The website is on the bottom, localizingcaliforniawaters.org. And you can also contact me at the information on the next slide. So hopefully that is an invitation to you all and to join the network in the community. And it's a really good place for you to learn what you may have been missing, but also to share your success stories. Lastly, everyone there, we are looking for like 2 more presentations. So if you have a success story that you want to share or a narrative or an idea, please let me know. But everyone who comes is really a participant. So as you decide to come or not come, you are actually a participant. There's a lot of discussion and facilitation and next steps. So thank you, Heidi, for the time, and thanks everyone. I don't know if there's time for questions.
Thank you, Regina. And I will ask if there are any questions. I haven't been to that. Laura, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for bringing this item up. And for those of us who haven't attended any of the Localizing California Waters conferences or events in the past, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more in explaining what is meant by land-based solutions and what the goals or kind of vision of Localizing California Waters is in more practical, terms of maybe some examples would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. That's a great question. It's probably on a couple of those slides. And as I'm kind of working off my phone, I might have skipped over that. So thank you. So land-based transformations is really how reconnecting land and water. And that's a broad stroke there, but essentially the actions and strategies that we can do to within a watershed-based toolkit. There's actually one for the Ventura River. What will add up to a desired outcome for that watershed? And that can mean anything from stormwater-based harvesting, BMPs and strategies. It can be that are focused on either water quality or recharge. It can be programmatic tools such as water transactions that help either create habitat, create a better water efficiency system as far as water sharing and water efficiency or water balance. It can mean the strategies such as direct install for such as fire-based approaches or building pollinator corridors, which are happening a lot in the Ventura, and how those pollinator corridors or fire-based strategies can add up to watershed health. So it's a very broad definition. And the reason that we're using it is because we're finding that there is some either redundancy or there are overlaps that we need to be talking about, where some approaches, say with fire and water or habitat, might be at odds with each other. And it's good for us to talk about how they are aligned and how to design them or create policies that promote the best quality of these approaches. And so I can be very specific if you want, and I give you a more detailed example. But again, all of these tool-based approaches on land and including their programmatic counterparts ideally are what adds up to the values and vision of that watershed, right? So whether it's stormwater LID, agricultural VMPs, water efficiency toolkits, commercial like CII based landscape transformations, whatever they are, or even programmatic or water transactional based programs like a forbearance program, any of those should result in the values or vision of that watershed and that help towards a healthy watershed community.
Thank you for that clarity. Last question, Candace?
Hi, Regina. Nice to see you.
Hi, Candace.
I've attended the Ventura ones, and I thought, like, for traveling to Yosemite, could you maybe just explain how it's going to be different, but still beneficial to us to come into the bigger discussion?
Yeah, so
Ventura was great and it was focused, but I'm just wondering how best we could participate.
yeah, I think the difference is in Ventura, we were really focused on the Ventura. You know, you're focused on a region versus on the statewide meeting, it's really understanding what's happening throughout the state. And actually, we even have some other folks coming from the Arid West to share strategies that are happening in their locale and how those collaborations worked and how to, you know, what was the monitoring or what were the policy recommendations, and then actually to workshop with those ideas and actually try to pull out the next steps that you can take back to your region. So it's really starting to look outside of your own region and be able to see what's working other places that are relevant to you and to help guide you towards thinking differently or what approaches could help you unstick or connect. So that's the difference. And I'd also say there's just a more robust hands-on and tours that may or may not be relatable. I think the tours this year will probably be highly relatable to almost everybody in California and probably the Arid West. So the tours are definitely something different than the regional. That may be really helpful. And also just for for those of you who haven't been before, the tours this year also have, I believe it's 6 different strategies and a control that they looked at that were not just looking at fire, but also habitat. And it was a 10-year study. And it's looking at everything from beaver analogs to, you know, different land and water treatments post and pre and post fire for a lot of different type of ecotones throughout the rimfire region. So that might be highly interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Regina.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Regina,
you.
and enjoy what you're doing.
Thanks.
Okay, next Next up, we have our transition update for the Santa Clara River Watershed Committee Coordinator. And so Heidi, I'll send it off to you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to be giving an update on the transition from this coordinator position being hosted by Public Works to the VCRCD. Just kind of let you guys in on what the goals are and what we're working on, and an invitation for all of you guys if you want to provide any input. So first off, I'm representing the VCRCD. Ventura County is in our name, but we are not like a department of the County of Ventura. We're actually a special district under the state of California. There's resource conservation districts all over the state. Last I checked, it was like 99 RCDs. So we serve the vast majority of Ventura County. And we tend to focus on the unincorporated areas, but you know, if cities agree that they welcome our work in their jurisdiction, then we're happy to partner. We've been around for over 70 years, and we have about 9 staff members, and we are grant funded. So that may be a potential benefit to this group, in that we are always looking at grants and going after grants and interested in collaborating with other stakeholders in the watershed to just help progress the goals of this group. A couple of the things that we do agriculture. You're going to learn about that later in the presentation towards the end of this meeting today. A lot of that deals with water quality. We do education, taking kids to various environmental locations throughout the county. Wildfire work. We are currently the lead for the Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative, and we do habitat restoration. Most of that right now is dealing with pollinator habitat. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. And then, as has kind of been alluded to earlier in the meeting, I'm also the watershed coordinator for the Ventura River. So hopefully that can kind of help just help make connections for this group and help us if we want to, you know, work on any initiatives or campaigns or anything. We hope that the VCRCD will be a useful partner for all of you guys. And then there's a picture of me. I had a baby last year, so all my recent pictures, I'm either very tired and pregnant looking, or I'm holding a baby. So that was the best one of me, if you can believe it, from this past year. But yeah, my name's Heidi Ortloff. I'm going to be your primary lead. We're probably going to also assign someone to be like a secondary, just like a backup person in case, you know, I'm sick or the baby's sick or something and we need someone else to step in or help attend multiple meetings. So there's me. Get familiar with me. My name's Heidi, and you'll get familiar with more of our staff as we start attending more meetings and meeting with stakeholders. So what's going on with transitioning? This is the previous work plan. We want to keep it as close to the same so you guys remain happy with our work. Doing outreach, maintaining communications, using the listserv, coordinating and holding these meetings, the website, coordinating with the upper watershed. Those are all part of our plans. Planning support, so IRWM, when that's going, providing support for that. Also just maintaining our understanding of various issues going on along the watershed. As you guys are all well aware, there's a lot of different topics to learn more about, stakeholders, issues, just to understand more fully. So that's, we're jumping in head first into just trying to serve you all better. And we, like I said, we expect this to mostly stay the same temporarily, just like logistics stuff. The website's going to be kind of transferred over to a WordPress format. So if you ever have any questions about what's going on with the website or updates you'd want to see, feel free to reach out and we can kind of explore that. But yeah, that's kind of what this past month is focused on, just the meetings and learning the website and learning who all the stakeholders are. Just since I've kind of been brought on and learning about this watershed, a couple watershed grant opportunities have come up. There was a regional climate collaborative grant opportunity being offered through the California Strategic Growth Council. A pre-proposal is being submitted, so nothing like, it's just a pre-proposal, but Ventura County Community Foundation and Tree People both approached the RCD about if we had potential projects that could be included. And I did mention the Ventura River Watershed and the Santa Clara River Watershed as potential work groups that could benefit from joining in this grant partnership. Also, the potential partner in a NOAA Climate Regional Resilience Grant opportunity. That one, from my understanding, we were asked if we were interested through Cal State Channel Islands. They're interested in kind of forming a collaborative, and they asked if the RCD would be interested, and of course, plug the watershed groups, right? And so, but that one was just a letter of intent. So if I hear back from any of those, I will let you guys know. But just as we were brainstorming possible things as we could work on updating, or actually for this watershed, creating a watershed management plan. A lot of these grants were just for capacity support, identifying potential projects, updating watershed information, and outreach campaigns. I think all the grants that I looked at right now had an emphasis on engaging more with like the wider community and like what messages do you want from your stakeholders to share with the wider community. So I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys have any efforts that you want to see the watershed coordinator position pursue, more than happy to hear it. And with that, I want to get over some of the more boring stuff. So I got you pulled in with the grant stuff, but now we got to talk about the boring stuff. But we're going to be having new invoices. So the RCD, we're going to be sending out invoices within the next month. And I know it can get confusing because you got invoices from Public Works, and now you're going to get invoices from the RCD. And you might think, you know, I paid an invoice to Public Works and that kind of stuff. So I'm expecting questions. Feel free to reach out. I'm going to be trying to reach out to all of the funding partners listed there before sending the invoice, just to give you a heads up so you understand. And this kind of leads to the next point. I think we need to be exploring creating MOUs to kind of streamline invoicing. It's especially useful when we have a lot of things that have happened recently, like staff changeover. There might be like someone that, you know, at some city that we're used to talking to, and then they retire, and then a new person comes in and they don't know what this is, and they don't understand like why these groups might be important and what kind of work we should go after. They're not used to the whole IRWM process. So that will be an undertaking, but something we want to get started this year. I also would like to look into creating a charter. Ventura River Watershed has a charter. It's been very, very useful, especially with applying for grants or just being able to catch someone up to speed if they're new to joining the group. Like these are our goals. This is, you know, who our main leads are, that kind of stuff. So the thing is, I can't do all of that by myself. So I may need like a subcommittee to provide input, suggestions for what our top priorities should be, tackling issues that can always be brought up to the larger group as a whole in meetings like this and such. But I just need a subcommittee working group to just tell me I'm in the right direction, right? And what would that look like if you join a subcommittee? I would send you potential charters. Maybe we'd start with looking at the Ventura River Charter and kind of deciding what parts of that are useful, what parts that aren't useful for this group. We probably have at least one group meeting to discuss as a whole, all over Zoom. I'm trying to make this as easy a commitment as possible for you all. And we would discuss it. I would try to incorporate your comments for review, and then I would like draft another charter based on everyone's feedback, and then send that out and kind of see how everyone feels about that. And hopefully it wouldn't be more than 1 to 3 meetings, depending on the need. But like I said, I really do need some of you guys, especially. I have the list of the funding partners there. You know, you guys are paying for me to do this work, so I want to make sure it's useful to you. So I'm kind of opening it up right now. If you want to email me later or just, you know, put a comment in the chat. But does anyone right now know that they would be interested in just providing that kind of that input for the direction of the group?
Any,
And any, like,
Right.
hopefully at least 5 people, you know.
3 or 5 people from maybe some of the organizations that are listed on the screen. If there is, I don't see any hands raised right now. But I think that that's also a question. So for me personally, how much time would that take? And are you looking at morning meetings, afternoon meetings, Zoom meetings, person?
Zoom
That helps
meetings-
to get
yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah, Zoom meetings, and it would really just, I would just hold the meetings. I'd probably just send out a doodle poll of when everyone's available. And, but yeah, I do want it to be as low a commitment as possible, you know, at least 1 meeting. It doesn't have to be done in the next month. I think I'd want to start looking at it in November, and just work on it for this fiscal year. But I think that having input from the group and coming up with the charter and stuff would especially help us as we apply for other grants. If we did want to apply for any planning grants, I think that would be,
Okay.
well,
Well, then
that would be attractive to any funders.
wonderful. So I would ask that you send an email out to all of our group, because there are some that aren't in attendance today. And so we can do a follow-up with that, and then maybe set an initial meeting so that we can see if people can attend, or a doodle survey, whatever, for the calendar. Oh, thank you for putting that together, because we all agree that funding is important. And if this is a way to do that, that would be great. Good idea. Thank you.
And then just last slide. So just a review for everyone. Invoices are going to go out, reaching out to each organization to explore the need for a MOU. Want to form a subcommittee to weigh in on a draft charter, and the website will be transferred to a new system. So if you have any questions, there's my email, heidi.ortloff@vcrcd.org. And yeah, I welcome hearing from all of you guys. So thank you.
All right. Any questions for Heidi? Appreciate you being here and being our executive director on this, or coordinator. So thank you. Hands, is there any other questions on this? Anyone behind me? All right. Okay, moving on. We have our last, go ahead, Councilmember Pearlie.
Are you feeling at all the agricultural various waterways, not only the Santa Clara, but the Edison Canal? The regional water quality had a meeting, and they're basically kicking the can down the road. It's got to be dealt with. There's pesticides, fertilizing, various other things coming to the springs. It's causing a major issue in the waterway in the United States.
Are you asking about the grants that were just mentioned? If that's what, or in general, if the.
But is that one of the issues that you would look at, or it's on your radar, or it's totally under you, not even aware of?
Yeah, it is on our radar. And maybe we're gonna have a presentation later today about agriculture. So hopefully that can kind of help answer some of your questions.
Because you're asking grants from the county of Ventura and the city of Oxnard, putting a tremendous amount of money into this, so try to get some. Want to have all the teams.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would definitely love to get everyone working on these issues all together. Yeah. Thank you though for pointing that out.
And we often have Jody Schweitzer here from the Farm Bureau, who's running the VCALG program that does, monitoring. So she's not, I don't know if she's online today, but
We have someone to speak.
So I will be presenting on agriculture in the Santa Clara River shortly, and Jody will be able to join from Zoom during that time. So she'll be able to answer additional VCALG questions.
Perfect. All right. With that, you'll be receiving a wonderful invite from Heidi to volunteer and create the charter. So thank you for your work before you sign up. Next, we have our Friends of the Santa Clara River program updates. And I just want a caveat, I have to leave at 10:15. We have the Spirit of Santa Paula ribbon cutting today. And the reason why I bring that up is it is a homeless shelter. And as we look for water quality in the Santa Clara River, having homeless out of the riverbed is extremely important. And this group is a wonderful group, making sure that we're doing the best we can for removing homeless out of the watershed and into transitional homes. So it's an exciting program. Thank you. And I'll go ahead with Heidi or Holly.
Hi, everyone. I'll try and speak loud enough. I am terrible at presentations, so hopefully the photographs will speak better than me. I think you guys have my my PowerPoint to share. Heidi. Thank you.
I think I got it. Let me go to the top.
Thanks. So yeah, here's just some updates from us. I'll run through some and then Candace will take over. So yeah, next slide. Oh yeah, that's the back. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's us. There's the very full Santa Clara River earlier this year. It's still pretty full out here. So yeah, next slide, Heidi, thanks. The important update from stewardship and education outreach is the Sespe Cienega native plant trail at the Fillmore Fish Hatchery. I think everybody's somewhat familiar. It was first established in 2018, roundabout with grant funds that UCSB gathered and SCRC we're working on too. And then they have a huge responsibility, you guys probably know, behind the restoration behind the hatchery. And this is affiliated, but it's a very small area in front of the hatchery that is Friends of Santa Clara River has stewardship of. And for 4 years or something like that, since the first funds were established to actually lay the trail and build the kiosk, that actually I think Heather Miranda's Girl Scouts raised that kiosk. Yeah, we were looking for grants and to continue to actually be able to finish this. And VCRCD, Deb Berenger, came to us. You can go to the next slide, Heidi. Deb came to us and said there's this California Natural Resources Agency grant for disadvantaged youth to have a chance to do some outdoor nature-based activities and trail building. Could we do it here? And we said yes. So Deb put together the program, and we had it was going to be in collaboration with a school in Santa Paula, but in the end it worked out better to be with the Boys and Girls Club of the Santa Clara Valley. So Piru, Fillmore, and Santa Paula. All those Boys and Girls Clubs came out and took part. The program we designed it to be essentially the kids would design the trail, they would do the planting and the trail building, they would have outdoor classrooms, and then they would then create interpretive signs based on their own experience and some of what they learned at the classrooms. Yeah, next slide, Heidi, please. Oh, I wanted to give the logos down there. I mean, I put Channel Islands Restoration in there. I'm a project manager there. And I just, wanted to say thanks because there was so much volunteer support from them over the years. So I just wanted to, they are very much a partner, and definitely SCRC are still involved also. And hopefully that will, you know, that will continue because this trail is definitely a part of the wider picture, but yeah, in the future. So yeah, this is, can't quite see the screen. Yeah, this is the outdoor classroom getting set up. Next trail, next next slide, Heidi, please. So yeah, the kids, we put in a bunch of trees, sycamores, walnuts, and cottonwoods. They're doing pretty good. Lots of plants. VCRCD do have a pollinator program. I think it's called Harmony, Heidi, maybe. So it was
Yes, you're
important to
correct.
them. Yeah, so it was important to them to put in some pollinator plants. Some are not, you know, specifically, you know, from this area of the river, this reach of the river, which can be tricky because, you know, Cienega means marsh. It's very specific, very this clay soil that can dry out and support riparian chaparral, but also it can be incredibly wet. So some of these plants are doing great, some not. It's interesting to see, but definitely the active planting is revegetating, and so is the passive restoration. Just there's a whole like patch of saltgrass that's come up and spreading, and so the kids, you know, we did weeding as well as planting, and the area is very much kind of restoring itself, although we need help for that ongoing. So the trees are doing pretty good. They're bigger than that now, and the kids had a lot of fun doing this, and it's something we hope could continue. Okay, next slide, Heidi. Yeah, so this is an example of the sign making I think we did, and I love the one down in the bottom, where is it, the bottom right of the screen. There's a fossil in that rock. So the kids, you know, drawing fossils. And then, you know, this boy Nero, you know, he created this Watershed poster, which was just so incredible. Just kind of started working, and then all of a sudden it was like, what? It's so descriptive and better than I could do. So the kids really enjoyed and engaged, and they definitely would like to, the Boys and Girls Club would like to continue this if we were able to, as an after-school program. They also have their own transport, which was another reason why it was easier for them to work with us here. Okay, next slide, Heidi. Some of the classes. So Alakoi Para came and taught some Shumash ethnobotany. There's Desiree from VCRCD having a watershed class. It was raining a lot of the time, so we were able to go and be in the classes too, in the club too. Mike Glenn from Fish and Wildlife Service had a condor class. I put in that picture. Mike designed that banner. It's got like the width of a hummingbird span, and then a red-tailed hawk and a bald eagle and a condor, so the kids can you know, they have fun measuring how big they are. And I think in one of the notebooks it says, I'm a bald eagle, bald-headed eagle, because, you know, it was really a lot of fun. And I'm not sure you could probably read what's on the notepads there, but there's a lot about you know, how many condors, you know, were left when they almost went extinct, and how many are there now, and where they are back in the CESB. We also had a tracker, a wildlife tracker that was there, and yeah, Desiree did pollinators again. So yeah, we had about 8 classes at least. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So there's a picture of, honestly, I have so many photographs that would just be way more fun than listening to me, because it really was a lot of, we had a really good time. That's the saltgrass there that's repopulated, revegetated itself. We definitely need more funding to keep going. There's no way this can continue on monthly volunteer days, which we do, but you know, we need to be able to keep the field from those non-native pasture pasture weeds, that we really need to be able just to have some kind of support with maintenance. So we're looking for that, but that could also go hand in hand with the program, with the nature-based outdoor classroom program. So yeah, that would be great if anyone wants to reach out. But we have good collaborators, you know, we're going to continue with ECRCD, Channel Islands Restoration, SCRC, UCSB. It's been really, really a wonderful way for us all to kind of connect in a small area. Okay, what's the next slide? Sorry. Okay, so we also, this is a different program now, and I want to say right now that thanks to Lynn, because this was paid for by the Prop 1 Water Talks Fund, and Lynn and her team were so supportive during the whole process, and it really was a great program. It had a lot of benefits. There's a guidebook that is about 80 pages long. It was created based upon a survey of field techs of what would be helpful. It's basically a guidebook for field techs, and the workshop was that as well, and it was bilingual, is bilingual in Spanish and English. So yeah, Fillmore, the city of Fillmore were really supportive. They let us have the morning session in City Hall, and then we went to the Sespe Cienega Trail, and you can see there's the classroom benefiting, you know, an adult learning program. And I know other groups have been able to use that space too. Yeah, it was a paid event, the techs were paid. Some contractors were not able to make it, but they are able to get the guidebook, and we're working on, you know, like a second revised edition that might be more practical than the format it's in now. Okay, what's the next slide? Okay, so this is the presenters, and yeah, thanks to Kat Selm presented, and Mike Glenn and Marianne and Alacoy, you know, speaking on their own experiences and work. And yeah, it was really, really a good, we all learned a lot. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so there was a certificate. I think it's important. I wanted to include this because it's a program that I know exists in sort of different versions. Theodore Payne up in the Upper Watershed, they have a pretty, I think it's actually kind of pretty established and funded by LA County agencies. It's like a native plant workshop for landscapers, and it's free, and you come away with I'm not sure if it's accredited, but our certificate wasn't accredited, but you got a certificate. The guidebook is available to download, and I would love to send it out to everyone if that's okay, Heidi, just because it's I don't know, if someone you know might find it helpful. It's got a lot of information about the whole watershed. It's the 1,600 square miles watershed based, not just one specific, you know, part of the river. And it has a lot about, you know, the reasons for Arunda and tamarisk removal and the others, you know, the related fire risks, as well as the amount of water consumption and biodiversity invasion. Okay, what's the next slide? My battery is going to go soon, but then Candice can take over. Okay, so more education and outreach. The Coastal Conservancy Explore the Coast School program is now in its 4th year, unbelievably. This was a collaboration with Nina Danza at Sierra Club, but Friends of Santa Clara River are the facilitators of this. And students from, it used to be just 5th and middle school, and it's now right through to high school. And the kids go to the estuary and the settling ponds, and yeah, have a time. It's a really good program, and it was proven so because the Coastal Conservancy decided to renew the grant for another 3 years. So OCC Live, I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's like a festival at Oxnard College, arts event, and Jim Danza, who is our chair and geography professor at OCC. He presented, I think he's done this before. It's a panel. Lynn was on the panel, as was Kat Salm, Dr. John Puglisi from Rio School District, the superintendent, and Diana Rodriguez, one of our board members, and also the Explore the Coast coordinator. So there was a really interesting panel discussion aimed at for kids, students in environmental conservation careers. That was the so that was the theme of the discussion. So the panelists gave their contribution from, you know, their experience in their own work to that. I think I described that right, Lynn and Kat. But okay, and then afterwards there was there were round tables for different hosts of tables, for example, restoration organizations who were able to talk about how, you know, how you get into the work and what it's like and that kind of thing. So the students could come and check that out. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, so yeah, HRNA, we are still the trustees of Hedrick Ranch Nature Area. I'm sure you guys are familiar with HRNA. I think it speaks for itself. There is still the restoration is still continuing, but it's very much established, but just continuing to take care of that, of the preserve and the wildlife that is. There is so much wildlife out here after the rains. Everything seems to be thriving and active and very present, which is great. And I think a lot of you might know about the Scordado Lab studies from Cal Poly Pomona. Elizabeth Scordado and her team are looking at the relationship between with wildlife in the easements and within the ag community and the GDEs here. So the whole picture. What's the next slide, please? Oh, now it's Candace. So yeah, that's everything.
Thanks, Holly. So Holly's also our stewardship manager of Hedrick Ranch Nature Area and oversees all our restoration stewardship opportunities and volunteer days. So she's got her hands full both at the Fulmar Hatchery and with the disadvantaged engagement grants, and great work, Holly. I'm going to switch gears to some of our planning and policy type issues. I've highlighted with the group previously that Friends of the Santa Clara River has been trying to do an integrated water resilience strategy for the Santa Clara River watershed. And ultimately in July, we had CEA Consulting finalize that report and estimate. We are currently fundraising for this $300,000 effort. Ultimately, we're looking at identifying multi-benefit water conservation opportunities by completing cost-benefit analysis of priority, current, planned, future, aspirational, and legally required water and natural resource projects on the watershed. And then ultimately, that's across both Ventura and Los Angeles counties. And then it's going to create a decision-making tool that will help prioritize affordable programs that benefit multiple stakeholders, water users and users, and build local water and biodiversity resilience. So it's really kind of trying to address the silos that we often operate in with regards to listed species and stormwater requirements and what capital investment projects are required from a water delivery and flood control perspectives, and really bringing all the cities, counties, and NGO entities together and identify a planning tool and how to prioritize that and how to get the best bang for our buck when we invest water into water infrastructure projects. So once we have this funded, we'll obviously be coming back to this group with greater detail on the tasks, but ultimately, you know, there's going to be a technical advisory committee with folks from these different stakeholder groups. There'll be public engagement, stakeholder outreach, and then identifying a list of projects, and then doing the cost benefit analysis and coming up with a project list that we can move forward as well. And then selecting key selection of projects, and then quantifying the cost benefit analysis on those. This group is obviously, this watershed committee is obviously going to be central in helping us facilitate that engagement. And so I'm excited once this is funded to bring it back to the group. Heidi, you can go to the next slide, please. Right, and then for many of you, a lot of the environmental stakeholders on the watershed came together when SGMA started, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And when the Board of Supervisors was considering adding Pumpers Association representatives to some of the groundwater sustainability agencies, the environmental community came together, and we created a collaborative, and EJ Remsen kind of coordinates that effort. And we have environmental representatives on some of our groundwater sustainability agencies in the county now. And I sit on the Fulmar and Pyro Basin's Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And one of the key roles of the environmental stakeholder there is to ensure that environmental considerations with regards to groundwater dependent ecosystems are adequately captured in the groundwater sustainability plans. And one of the biggest successes that we've had in this initial 5-year planning effort with the GSAs is that we've installed monitoring wells in critical groundwater dependent ecosystems. So here you see an outline of both the Fulmar and Pyro Basins, the groundwater sustainability agencies. And then Heidi, if you go to the next slide, the Stillwater Sciences was the environmental consultant for the GSA. And their tech memo, which informed a lot of the GSP, identified key groundwater dependent ecosystems with in and along the basins. And so some of these key monitoring wells went into the East Grove, which is the, the dark green towards Santa Paula, which hugs Santa Paula Road. And I don't know, in one of Holly's prior slides, there's actually a slide of all the field text in front of a sign, which was the former Pyro Basin GSA board showing that the installation of the monitoring well there. It really is well positioned. Hedrick Ranch Nature Area is a well-established riparian habitat on the Santa Clara River, and it's immediately adjacent to a productive agricultural field. And so we have a nested monitoring well there, so we can address when groundwater pumping in the basin, in the section of the basin, might be impacting that sensitive habitat. Then further upstream, we go to the Cienega, which is the dark blue GDE on the map. There we have, one deep well and then several other more shallow wells, and those are sprinkled and scattered throughout the Santa Clara River Conservancy's restoration work at the Fulmar Fish Hatchery, which is on Department of Fish and Wildlife property. And so you can clearly see we've put the monitoring wells where we actively doing restoration and where we can actively see whether or not groundwater pumping might be impacting those. Those monitoring wells were in excess of $400,000, but we still have data gaps. And so even tomorrow, Sandy Hedrick, which is one of our friends of the Santa Clara River board members, but also on the Santa Clara River Conservancy, he has property on South Mountain Road in the East Grove. And one of the other locations that we've identified as potential over summer rearing habitat for steelhead is Lost Creek, which is a tributary on the main stem of the Santa Clara River. Sandy actually caught his first trout in Lost Creek. And when we were, as part of the Santa Clara Steelhead Coalition, identifying where to do monitoring for steelhead, Lost Creek was highlighted because there's a spring on site which provides cold, cool water for steelhead. And so we're going out tomorrow to identify where to put our temperature monitors and also assess whether or not there is an opportunity to enhance habitat there, especially in years like this where we have flow throughout the summer. There's potential for steelhead to actually be in these locations and not just migrating on the main stem. And so it's also seeing whether we have an opportunity to provide better habitat by enhancing the habitat there. And then we've also been collaborating with UC Santa Barbara, with Tom Dudley and the UC Brain School. They doing another assessment that's also watershed wide with the potential of doing eDNA. And we might be able to do some eDNA work in this Lost Creek area so that we can also identify if there is a presence or absence of steelhead, and then help inform the GSAs on how to manage appropriately if listed species are found in this area and this GDE as identified in the management plan, and then if and how that might address the management actions. All right, I see a hand from Kat, and you're welcome to interrupt me while we're going.
Thanks, Candace. I was just wondering if you could point out, and I don't know if I don't think you're controlling this, but I don't know where Lost Creek is. So I was just wondering if that could be pointed out. Thanks.
Do you want? I don't have control. Lost Creek it's along South Mountain Road, and it is west of Hedrick Ranch Nature Area. So where you see the bottom boundary of close to Santa Paula, that's kind of like the 12th Street Bridge. So it's between the 12th Street Bridge, hugging South Mountain Road. I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, next slide. So Friends of the Santa Clara River is also one of the founding members of the Santa Clara River Steelhead Coalition. And Sissar Creek is a private Arizona low flow crossing, which was identified as a complete barrier on Sissar Creek, which is a tributary of Santa Paula Creek. And Stillwater Sciences did a lot of research, and they noted that some of the most productive Southern California steelhead habitat in all of the Santa Clara watershed is actually in Sissar Creek. So for that reason, a lot of the coalition's activities have been focused on Santa Paula Creek and Sissar Creek. You know, there's been biological opinions with regards to the Army Corps ladder in Santa Paula, and CalTrout is working at the Harvey diversion with regards to fish passage there. And then the next complete upstream barrier is Sissar Creek. And so we have designed a 90-foot full span bridge to take out the Arizona crossing. And then we will be addressing the upslope and downslope differential in the gradient, basically restoring the stream bed. The 90-foot bridge is designed with climate change projections in mind. So it's for a 100-year flood. We work with Stillwater to outline the monitoring compliance and the permitting required for the project. We submitted 2 proposals to the Department of Fish and Wildlife earlier this year. One was to FRGP, and then the other, which is the Fisheries Restoration Grant Program, and then the other was to the Watershed Restoration Grant Program. We did a concept proposal. We've had some interactions with Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm anticipating we'll know in the fall whether or not we are being called back to do a full proposal. The project cost at this point is just a little bit over $2 million with all the compliance, permitting, and construction costs. We're hoping that construction will be happening in the summer of 2024. Next slide, please. So Ed Wallace and myself, Ed Wallace is the principal engineer from Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. We're actually going out on Friday after the recent winter flooding and then this more recent tropical storm. We're just going to assess whether or not there has been any impact to our final plan designs. And I'm not anticipating anything that is going to require design review, but we would be including any revisions into the design plans in the full proposal if need be. And then the next item is long-term management and protection of the Santa Clara watershed. And so a lot of parties that are on the call and have been engaged in the watershed for a long time are familiar with the State Coastal Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy partnership on the Santa Clara Parkway. And Hedrick Ranch Nature Area was the first property to be purchased and acquired for the Parkway vision. And as we move on to our 30 years of anniversary at Friends of the Santa Clara River, we're trying to facilitate a conversation about that ultimate Parkway goal of a collaborative management entity, bringing all the different open space and managed preserves and properties along the watershed together, and basically starting those discussions about how can we all collectively manage. So I think, this watershed committee has been great in bringing the partners together and having discussions about what everybody is doing. But this is really addressing an ongoing long-term management, operation, and maintenance needs that a lot of non-governmental organizations are struggling with around ongoing Arundel maintenance and raising funds for that ongoing capacity building and management into the long term. And so we've started discussions with the different land trusts on the watershed and ultimately trying to come up with an entity that can address that long-term protection across the watershed and even include future acquisitions in the future and provide that ongoing maintenance and operation, but also that collaboration around how we do planning across our different entities. And so some of the initial discussions have discussed what the Parkway identified as, Joint Powers Authority or Conservancy or MOU. And it's really about having those initial discussions about, well, what are the next steps and how can we collectively do that? And yeah, it's still very much early days, but it is the ultimate goal of the Parkway project, and we kind of have to be looking towards what that entity is to fulfill what the legislature required when they put the funds out for these acquisitions in the first place. Right, next slide. And then Coastal Cleanup Day is September 23rd this year. And Friends will be hosting 3 sites. We'll be at Oxnard at Mandalay Beach with the California Conservation Corps. We'll be in Fillmore with the city of Fillmore, and then we're partnering with the Nature Conservancy at their Johnson site in Ventura. So we have beach coastal cleanups, but we also have our upstream riverway cleanups. And frankly, the river cleanups are the ones that have the most trash because we have a lot of cleanup operations by the cities on the beaches. And so if you live in Fillmore or Ventura, we can definitely use your help there. But it's also very nice to be at the beach on Coastal Cleanup Day too. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, Friends of the Santa Clara River is celebrating their 30th anniversary. And so you can save the date. We're having a celebration at the historical Dudley House in Ventura on October 7th. And you are all welcome. And we will be discussing some of these, ongoing projects and future plans. And we just want to get together with the friends and our fellow friends and partners on the river and just celebrate what we have done over the last 30 years and come together and celebrate the work that everybody else is doing too, and look towards the future on what we can do together. All right, next slide, please. So we're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and you have our email address there and telephone number. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly. And it's always nice to give an update on what we're busy with, and hope to hear from you all soon.
Thank you, Candace. That was great. Does anyone have any questions in the audience? Does anyone have any questions over Zoom? You can raise your hand or enter it in the chat.
Heidi, actually, I have a question.
Oh, we do have a question in the audience.
Thanks. This is Sarah Mulder at the City of Ventura. I was just curious, for your temperature monitors and tributaries, are you only focusing on Lost Creek, or are there other tributaries that you're putting those in?
So right now, the California Fish Passage Forum requires post-implementation monitoring for fish passage, but also the environmental conditions in restoration sites. So as restoration sites happen, we'll do, post-effectiveness monitoring, which will include that. The effort at Lost Creek is very particular because it's groundwater dependent ecosystem related. When our groundwater sustainability plans at the former Empire Basins went final, I was the only director on the board that didn't approve the final iterations because I didn't feel that endangered species were adequately considered. They were not sustainable management criteria for Southern California steelhead. And so I see it as a major data gap in the GSPs and something I'd like to have incorporated in the updates. And so this is really an effort by friends and environmental stakeholders to start collecting that data to help better inform the GSP update in the future, but also provide that data to help the GSA make better decisions about GDE management. And I just see this as a particularly sensitive area that needs more monitoring. And so that's why we're addressing that site in particular. And because it's spring fed, we know that there's the potential for over summer rearing habitats, where that's not necessarily the case in other stretches where the stream might perform more of a migratory function for steelhead. But certainly if there are other areas that folks have identified, the NOAA Restoration Center is very open to monitoring, and that's definitely something you want to take, if you know of other sites, to the Santa Clara Steelhead Coalition for consideration too.
Any other questions? Someone shared in the chat that you can see all the Coastal Cleanup Day sites. They're listed at vccoastalcleanup.org. And if there's no other questions, we're going to go on to our next presenter. It's going to be Emily. She is a fellow colleague of mine at the VCRCD. I don't work with her very often. She focuses on agriculture, and I think this is going to be a very interesting presentation. So thank you, Emily.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Okay. My name is Emily Nye. I'm the Agricultural and Environmental Sustainability Specialist at the RCD. Like Heidi said, I'm her coworker and I work on the agricultural team primarily. So today I'm going to talk about agriculture in the Santa Clara River, a bit about us as a conservation partner, and our other partners in the community that we work with frequently in agriculture. I'm going to talk about water quality monitoring in the watershed, the best management practices for farmers, and then some of the programs that we have that farmers can utilize to address those concerns. Go ahead. So I'm not going to talk in length about the RCD as Heidi already introduced our organization, but it is the grant programs we heavily rely on for our agriculture offerings, from financial incentives to implement conservation practices to the technical services we provide, and the education we provide to our farmers and ranchers is dependent on grants. The agriculture team is 3 of us at the RCD. Jamie Whiteford, he's here on the Zoom call. He's the director of programs and grants. Vic Akunzade, he's our irrigation specialist, and myself. So our conservation partners in the community we regularly work with include the UC Cooperative Extension and the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's a federal organization. And then the Farm Bureau of Ventura County. And I want to thank Jody Schweitzer for attending on Zoom as well. She'll be able to answer additional questions regarding water quality monitoring on farms. So between the 4 organizations, we can offer farmers in the county various opportunities in education, research, policy assistance, technical support, financial support. So together is really is how we're able to work with individuals in the community and offer this comprehensive assistance. So a bit about agriculture in the county at large. It is last year over $2 billion in gross sales in ag. We're number 10 in the nation and in the state, and over 40,000 individuals are working on our farms in Ventura County. So it is a huge part of our economy. And so it's definitely important for our farmers that they're doing practices that saves them money and encourages a healthy farm environment for their workers. But also, there's a lot of concerns that the public has on the water quality, and the farmers do want to address those things. Our crops that we're growing in the county, top crops are strawberries, avocados, lemons, celery, and nursery stock, that being our potted plants for landscaping and things. We have over 2,000 farms, nearly 100,000 irrigated acres, and about twice that in rangeland. So there's a lot of potential for practices to be implemented that can help in the watershed. Most of the farms, 78%, are under 50 acres. So we have a lot of small farms in the county. This means that you're working with, as well as a lot of family farms. So we're working with small groups. They might not have all the time in the world. Like, they don't necessarily have a sustainability specialist on their team to work on these things. So, but they're working so diligently on the efforts to improve their water conservation, nutrient conservation, and we'll talk more about that as well. So in the watershed, about 60% of the Santa Clara River watershed is in Ventura County, with the major tributaries being the Sespe, the Piru, and the Santa Paula creeks. For the watershed in the 500-year floodplain area, about 62% of the land use is in agriculture and another 22% in industry. And so you can see the dark green is the avocados, and that is primarily on more of our hillier areas. And then the orange is going to be our citrus, so our lemons and oranges. And then we have a little bit of strawberries in the lower portion of the watershed, and sprinkled throughout we have some row crops and other crops as well. So the Santa Clara watershed, several reaches and tributaries are on the federal listed of impaired water bodies due to salts, bacteria, and pesticides. Previously, nitrogen compound was on that list, but it has been recently delisted, which is a good thing. That means that the receiving water has improved enough and is meeting water quality standards for long enough to delist it. So nitrogen is no longer on that list. Although nitrogen is no longer on the list, it is still something that VCALG monitors for. It is the Regional Water Board. It is still on the TMDL list, the total maximum daily load. Nitrogen compounds, chloride, bacteria, and toxaphene are on the list of things that are monitored in the stream. And you can go next slide, please. So the particular group that's monitoring agricultural water, or I should say water discharge, is the VCALG group, which again, Jody Schweitzer can allude to more, but I'll give a brief overview. VCALG is the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group, and they, on behalf of farmers, are monitoring sites throughout the watershed to see the compliance with these TMDLs. We have 6 major sites in the watershed. These sites are considered representative of the agriculture within their HUC 12 or their sub-watershed. So the results that they get from testing and at the site represents that sub-watershed. And there's a 7th site a newer 7th site in the estuary of the watershed. So with monitoring all of these sites over several times over the course of the year, we can see a picture over time, the discharges or lack thereof discharges coming from agricultural land. Of the 4 TMDLs that we're concerned with, there was a one-time exceedance at 4 different sites in 2022, and that being primarily at the first wet weather event of the year. It's possible that this exceedance happened because of a large rain event washing out nutrients into the river. So to combat that, we would recommend things like sediment and water retention practices on farms. But this chloride, there are no exceedances due to agricultural sources. Only natural sources are the reason for chloride in the watershed. For bacteria, farmers have until March 2029 to meet the compliance, and they're currently meeting the interim allowable exceedance days. And then with toxaphene, sorry, it's okay. And with toxaphene, toxaphene is a pesticide that was banned in 1990, but there's residuals in the soil and it can last for decades. So when that chemical persists and there's a runoff event that carries sediment, that is how toxaphene is getting into the waterway. Farmers have until October 2025 to meet compliance for toxaphene in the estuary. Okay. So just a little more on VCALG. In the Santa Clara watershed, there's over 500 landowners and nearly 30,000 acres, irrigated acres. That's 92% of the farmers are voluntarily a part of VCALG, meaning that they are paying in to VCALG to use their services, to get the testing, to get informed on how they're doing and recommendations. So if a monitoring data shows that water quality benchmarks are exceeded, VCALG prepares a water quality management plan that can identify steps that growers in the area can take to meet the targets. So some of the treatment types that are recommended by VCALG are into different categories. The source control, so reducing the source of the nutrients, for example, the structural non-treatment, trapping the concern, like the nitrogen, for example, as a concern, or treatment BNP, so capturing the water and then treating the water for that nitrogen. It's in order of recommendation. You want to address the source first before you implement the more expensive practices of treatment. So, for example, with nitrogen exceedances, farmers in the HUC 12 would have to specify their management practices that addresses a nitrogen exceedance, whether it be what are they doing for irrigation efficiency to reduce their runoff? Are they putting together a certified nutrient management plan? Or are they implementing some sort of control system to remove nitrogen from their discharges? If there is a toxaphene exceedance, similar practices will be required or recommended to farmers of improving irrigation efficiency, reducing irrigation runoff, sediment runoff, and increasing stormwater infiltration. So in particular, programs that the RCD and the NRCS regularly help farmers with include a lot of water quality management practices. These are very common in the community and a standard practice at this point. So we have our irrigation management. One of the free offerings we have with RCD is to do an irrigation evaluation to determine your distribution uniformity. So that allows farmers to see, are they evenly distributing water throughout their system? And that's important so you know you're not overwatering in one area and underwatering in another, but also because most farmers are fertilizing through their irrigation lines. It's called fertigation. And if you are overwatering one area, you're also over fertilizing one area. And that could have the potential to mean leaching or a runoff. So having a good distribution uniformity is kind of a first step for a lot of growers. And we've done hundreds of irrigation evaluations at this point from the RCD. Irrigation efficiency is next. If you overwater, you have the potential for overland runoff or leaching below the root zone where the plants can't use the water. So farmers, it's expensive to use water at this point. They don't want to overwater. So they're really looking at monitoring the soil moisture, the evapotranspiration, and the crop needs to see how much should I be applying and when should I be applying. So that way they can save money, reduce how much they're losing, right? So these practices are standard. Next, please. Fertilizer management, nutrient budgeting per the crop. So what does the crop need? How much is in the soil by doing soil testing, doing a leaf analysis? How much is the crop uptaking? Getting this comprehensive view so farmers know how much fertilizer they should be adding or not add. This is also a common practice. There's several different labs in the area that we regularly work with to help farmers do this. And nutrient budgeting or nitrogen management plans are going to become, most likely, if the agricultural order goes through, going to become a requirement for all farmers in the county. Then sediment, oh, sorry. Then sediment management. I already mentioned these things, but reducing overwatering, switching from our flood irrigation, which is the top picture, to our drip and micro sprinkler irrigation. The micro sprinkler and drip are much more targeted to the root zone and the plants, so that is more efficient in its water use, and it doesn't have as great of a runoff potential as the flood irrigation methods. And most of our, especially our orchard crops, our avocados and citrus are doing micro sprinklers and drip if it's a new orchard. And then additional stormwater runoff practices that we have funding to implement and or we are applying for funding to implement include cover cropping, filter strips, other infiltration practices. Basically anything a farmer can do to cover their bare soil is going to help reduce the runoff of sediment and nutrients into the waterways. So even mulch is a good thing. Okay, next. So looking at what farmers are already doing, this data is coming from our VCALG surveys that went out to farmers in the watershed. So just to note, about half of the farmers already have certified nutrient management plans, which is great. This they can keep them on site. Oftentimes, they don't have to send them out yet to be reviewed. But if the agricultural order is passed in, I believe, September, then it is possible that by March 2025, all farmers will have to have a certified nutrient management plan they submit to the regional water quality board. Most of the farms in the watershed are conventionally farmed. Under about 8% are organic. About a third are on a slope, which is a concern for the water runoff because the slope, the water can really pick up speed and take soil and nutrients with it. So having good practices on those sloped acreage is important. Most 80% of irrigation practices are already drip and micro sprinkler. So that's good. 80%, that's a success. But where we can improve is the 20% that has the overhead and furrow irrigation. So there's some room for improvement. Oh, I can't see.
Candace, do you have a question? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, Emily, further down in your in the table, it says here that you have constructed wetlands. Does RCD review how well those constructed wetlands are operating?
So the constructed wetlands and the practices at the bottom here are primarily going to be through the NRCS because they have engineers on staff and they have funding to implement these kind of larger structural practices. At this time, as of today, we don't have, RCD does not have any active grants that allows constructed wetland, but that doesn't mean we can't have it in the future. It's just, that would be a practice, the NRCS. Farmers would seek financial and technical assistance through the NRCS to implement those.
No, I'm mentioning it because I've been on site at one location and I think the constructed wetland was kind of overwhelmed with the amount of treatment that is required and might not actually be able to operate to meet the best management practice, right? And I was just wondering who monitors how and how effective those are being, or if they are overwhelmed.
I'm not as familiar with who's monitoring those systems.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did someone else have their hand raised? Jody, do you want to add anything?
Jody. Hi, Jody.
Yeah, hi everybody. Jody Schweitzer with the Farm Bureau. I just wanted to add in there that this is a kind of a combination answer for this best management practice category. The majority of growers who would be implementing something here would be a detention or a retention basin. Constructed wetlands present significant food safety issues when they're adjacent to farmland. So I would consider that 16% likely to be detention or retention basins.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn this way. So many of our farmers are already implementing different erosion control practices, which is excellent, 83% here in the watershed. Mulch is pretty significant, especially in the orchards. You don't need mulch in the well-established, healthy avocado orchards because the leaves act as mulch, actually. They have a really dense leaf mulch. Most of our farmers are using soil moisture monitoring to determine when they should be irrigating. So we're on a good path for our irrigation kind of source control practices. Where we could potentially have room for improvement is our structural treatment, things like having grassed waterways or having more cover crops or filter strips so that if there is any runoff, especially in larger storms that we've had here in the last year, that it is being trapped and slowed down to allow for better infiltration. Yeah. And these things just kind of reiterate what I've already said. You know, our room for improvement is our erosion control, reducing our bare soil on farms. Again, those certified nutrient management plans are going to be most likely required to be submitted by March 2025 if the agricultural order goes through. And that's something that the RCD is able to help farmers with. And then other practices to reduce rain and irrigation runoff, as discussed. So for these practices, to make them, to implement them on farms, we need to make sure it's feasible. It is financially a burden on many farmers to implement any new practices. It's a risk to change the standard of practice. They could potentially have financial loss. So having grants and the federal funding available is so important for these farmers, and providing that technical assistance from us and the NRCS is one way that we're able to direct farmers in the right direction. But also because so many of our farmers are small farmers, some of these practices require equipment use that they might use once or twice a year, and equipment is quite expensive. So one option that I'd love to explore more in the community is having equipment rentals for the smaller farmers so that they can implement these good practices. All of the practices we recommend are backed by the USDA, the CDFA, the DOC. They are linked to climate and water quality benefits.
You have a hand raised.
Oh,
Michelle. Oh, ask her to.
Oh.
Unmute yourself.
Oh, Michelle, if you have a question.
Yeah, just I'd actually like to get connected with you on that idea because Assemblymember Bennett has some legislation that's actually geared towards farmer tool sharing. So AB 552, which you can see on our website, is kind of expanding kind of the other models that you might have seen, particularly in Fresno, about having cooperative farm tool sharing programs. So this would establish or allow the state of California to support the establishment of such farmer cooperative tool sharing. So if there's any way that we could dovetail into, you know, your interest in that, then, you know, we would love to partner and help you.
Thank you so much. I'll have my email up at the last slide, so I'd love to connect with you. Again, these practices are already being implemented on farms in the community. So they're being tested, and as well, that allows for other farmers to have those peer-to-peer conversations that are authentic, to know what works, what doesn't work. So closing this gap, again, making it accessible, making sure we have bilingual messaging and technical services available. The education and outreach from our conservation partners is pretty strong already, but we're always looking for more ways for financial support, essentially, to help farmers implement these practices. So right now, the specific grants we have active that can address different water quality concerns are the Water Efficiency Technical Assistance, WETA. That has to do with our free irrigation evaluations. We do free pump testing through Southern California Edison. That's required to apply for other grants. And we do the nitrogen management practice suggestions, the CAP-G program that allows us to provide free plans to farmers on nutrient management planning, pest management plan, carbon farm plan, you name it. The pollinator habitat program that allows us farmers to implement specific pollinator habitat on their farm and be reimbursed up to $200,000 for that implementation. And CUSP is a program that provides reimbursement for approved drought-related expenses from farmers that incurred drought-related expenses since 2021. And that's up to $20,000 every 12 months. So if farmers have these needs or interests, reach out. We have money right now for those things. And then upcoming, we have 2 additional grants from the State Water Board. We've been awarded, but it's yet to be executed. So it's just not quite billable yet, but we know down the line, we'll have more opportunity to implement those soil moisture monitoring sensors we're calling it the iMerlin, to reduce our leaching of nitrogen in the watershed. And the aqua funding, the final grant that'll come live soon, allows us to provide up to 60% of the hardware costs for agricultural management agricultural management measures and irrigation efficiency upgrades that improve water quality. There are several other possible grants that farmers are going to be really interested in, and that's the SWEEP and the HSP grant. Those are 2 CDFA grants. We did apply as the block grant recipient, the RCD. We're waiting to hear back to see if we get funding. If we do, and each grant it would be $4 million out to farmers to implement practices for healthy soil, for water conservation and energy conservation. So we don't know yet, but we will soon know. And then there's so many other developing opportunities, from invasive species removal in Arundo to oak restoration and wildfire fuel management. Those things my coworkers work on, and thank you for attending today's meeting. And they'd be happy to talk with you more about ideas for the watershed regarding those topics. So I just wanted to thank you all for listening today. If you have any resource concerns, one more time. If you have any more resource concerns, we have a intake form to fill out where you can connect, or we can connect you with our current programs, as well as inform. It will help us inform what grants we should go after so that we can meet the needs of the community. So if you have any further questions, I'm able to take them now.
Okay, we do have another group that's going to use this room after us, but I think we can give about 5 to 7 minutes for questions if anyone has any.
I have a quick question. Are you coordinating much with groundwater sustainability agencies and in their plans? There's a nexus there between all the great work you're doing and outcomes related to groundwater sustainability. I was just curious how you engage with our GSAs.
I think Jamie would actually be the better person.
Jamie, are you in the meeting? See if he's. I think he left. Okay.
Apologize. Okay, so I've been here for 5 months, so I don't have the best answer for that question, unfortunately. But that is something that it is a priority of ours to have those close working relationships with our community members. And so if there's any opportunity to partner with the GSAs, then we want to. I personally haven't worked with them yet just because I am still rather new. But that's something I would like to maybe write some notes on and talk to you a little bit more about later. Yeah.
So if you could use one of the microphones at the front table so everyone can hear you. You just press it to, if it's green, it's on.
My question, these programs providing technical assistance until 2029. My question is, did I sense from your presentation, actually, I said that for 2029 there are additional.
So first part of that, the grants, each grant that we have has a different timeline. Some of them are 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It just depends on the grant. And we're constantly looking for more to continue our work into the future. And with regard to the 2029 timeline, that was for the one, let's see. The total maximum daily load for bacteria has to be reached by March 2029. And then currently, the interim data is showing that we are meeting the allowable amounts of exceedance. So as of right now, monitoring shows that farmers are on their way to meeting that requirement.
Just as a water quality person in the river, the bacteria TMDL applies to all dischargers, not just farmers. So the total maximum daily load is a load for the Santa Clara River. So storm drain discharges, sewage treatment plant discharges, construction site discharges, industrial waste permittees, anybody with an NPDES permit to discharge to the Santa Clara River will have to meet, and it's wet weather, E. coli bacteria standards by 2029.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Peter over Zoom, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so also I'm a water quality professional. So I've had this discussion with Jody, but I guess it's 2 questions is can you kind of expand the regulatory issues that ag is encountering with the water quality regulations that they're currently when the WDR is adopted will have to comply with, and how that contradicts the USDA regulations. For example, the structural BMP implementation to reduce a variety of pollutants in stormwater are somewhat in contrast to what USDA wants to see on farms, like vegetative filter strips, grassy swales, detention basins, all that. And how just farming and agriculture in general is going to potentially adapt, or what's going to happen in the future potentially. And then the second question is do the agency or the organizations that support agriculture have the staffing to support agriculture in the future with a much greater need for BMP implementation tied to the tentative ag waiver order that's coming down the pike in the next few months or a year?
Yeah, I'll try and remember what you asked. I'll start with the last question. For the staffing wise, we are hiring right now. but as well as NRCS. They are hiring several more soil conservationists that are able to work with farmers on technical and financial services to implement these conservation practices. So both organizations are growing. This RCD was maybe 4 staff 2 years ago, and now we're 9. So we are growing. But there's always so much work to do. So that's why we partner with so many different organizations to provide these resources. I have a really short-term memory. I'm so sorry.
Can I jump in with a little bit on that, Emily?
Thank you, Jody. Oh, didn't know if you were still here.
No worries. I'll speak to the technical service provider capacity issue first. So that's definitely something, that we have been talking about with regional board staff, with our partners in the watershed. There is an implementation track being proposed in the tentative WDR right now, which we believe is the track that's going to lead to actions in the field that will improve water quality. So that's really something that, we proposed it, we're in support of it, really want to make it workable and feasible and as effective as possible. And one of the most important elements of that is bringing these technical service providers to the field to make field specific recommendations with growers, to continually work with them as they're implementing these technologies and management practices, so that their guidance and expertise can help, make the BMPs as effective as possible and improve water quality. But there's going to be a lot of demand for that as soon as the ag order gets adopted and, growers start reaching out to these technical service providers and increasing the kind of list of qualifications for who can be a technical service provider, so that we have the capacity is also something that we're working with the regional board to do. So in addition to bringing additional grant funding to RCD so that they can hire even more staff, bringing in extra funding through, the Farm Bill, which funds the NRCS folks, but also the National Water Quality Initiative, additional money that they have to work with growers. And then NRCS also have a technical service provider program where they're able to work with outside folks to train them up to their standards. They have to pass a test. And as soon as they do that, they're able to work with growers and be reimbursed. So we can really beef up that technical service provider list when the demand is there. And we're just trying to make sure that everything fits together right. Your first question was in regards to, I think, conflicting regulatory requirements. I'm not so sure what the USDA thing is. That the food safety issue that you're referring to there? Yeah. So
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there's, bringing vector habitat adjacent to fields, specifically, rotational vegetable or berry fields. Those are food safety concerns, which just mean, any grower would fail their gap audit and not be able to sell their produce if there is that type of a habitat adjacent to their field. So there is this conflicting requirement from a water quality perspective where you want to bring in these engineered wetlands or vegetated waterways, but then from a food safety perspective, if you have that adjacent to your field, then you would fail your food safety audit and not be able to sell your crop, which obviously a farmer can't do. So there are discussions that are happening in other regions in the Central Coast. When they were adopting their Ag Order 4.0 2 years ago or so, there was a workshop where they had food safety inspectors and they had water quality folks who were talking about, how do we align these regulatory expectations? And a lot of it is with, it's the buyers of the food. It's your Costco or your Walmart who have their food safety requirements as a buyer, and growers have to meet those. So there's still discussions going on about, what's acceptable from a food safety perspective, and then, what can we do that will still improve water quality. And there are other options outside of just those kind of vegetated practices that would bring those vector habitats right adjacent to fields. But those are still challenges that we're working through and really trying to bring those discussions to the right people. And I
Yeah, I
have a
just wanted,
pretty concrete
I just
answer for
wanted to
that,
bring
though.
it up in the group just because it's not talked about very often that we
Mhm.
have these conflicting regulations on these farmers, and it's really a choice. Like, do I comply with the water board, or do I comply with potentially, you said it's not your,
It's the FSMA regulation for
Yeah.
food safety. And it's not so much of a choice from a grower's perspective because, if they fail their food safety audit, they can't sell, they can't operate. So that's a hard, line that they come up against. California Department of Food and Agriculture, so CDFA, they're doing a regulatory alignment study right now. And so they hired a consultant. I can't remember the consultant's name, but they're going all over the state and they're talking with growers. They talked with us. They're talking with food safety auditors to try to better understand these two regulatory drivers. And then they'll ultimately be bringing recommendations back. So
Well, that's
hopefully
great
there's progress.
to hear. So thank you for that update, because for those that work on water quality, like it seems like it's not, like you said, it's an easy choice for farmers to choose the food safety over the water quality benefits, because it's the bottom line of making revenue on the farms. And that's the biggest issue that I see in implementation of improving water quality coming out of agriculture in the Santa Clara River watershed, but also just any watershed in Ventura County, even if in the state of California. So.
Okay, thank you. I am going to have to conclude the meeting. Thank you for the good discussion and the good questions, everyone in attendance. Our next meeting is tentatively set for October 26th. And thank you, Peter, for your questions. I will follow up on that, and maybe we'll have a separate presentation next year on those regulatory issues that you brought up. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.